jump to ABC.
I've kept time on your stories and mine tonight. You owe me 4 minutes.
Telling friends she knew she had to find a new role. She soon did. As the co-anchor of 2020, she cast a wide net. Heads of state, murderers, movie stars all got the same intense treatment. She was famous for making many of them cry. She said she didn't do it on purpose.
You caught me off guard, I'm sorry.
She was her own best booker and meticulous in her research. Her producers said she was involved in the edit of every interview. She never learned to drive. She was crusty and competitive, soft-hearted and generous. It wasn't that she didn't get knocked down along the way. It's just that she always got back up. And that changed things for her and for the rest of us. Cynthia McFadden, NBC News, New York.
Now, understand something. Barbara Walters, for a lot of us growing up, that was the anchor that we all know. Especially for 2020 and for ABC. Did not know that she actually started off at NBC. But there is a reason for a lot of us why Barbara Walters is special. I always called her, she was a journalist first and foremost. She was a little bit gangster with it. What I mean by that is that she went after some people. Some people deserved it. Some people I was just like, and she was able to walk away from that. My personal favorite will always and forever be the one thing that she told this family that America wanted to say since we got stuck with them.
As famous for being famous. You don't really act, you don't sing, you don't dance, you don't have any, forgive me, any talent.
But we're still entertaining people.
You are all often described as famous for being famous. You don't really act, you don't sing, you don't dance, you don't have any, forgive me, any talent.
But we're still.
I will forever be grateful that Barbara Walters simply said the one thing that America has always wanted to ask: what the crap are the Kardashians famous for? But of course, the Kardashians weren't the only ones that she got. Keep in mind, I always say this all the time. Muammar Gaddafi, she shook him. A known, arguably, depending on where you are in the country, terrorist. She shook a terrorist. Observe.
In 1989, Gaddafi's antics prompted ABC's Barbara Walters to ask straight away whether he was unstable.
We read that you are mad. You know that those things have been printed. Does it make you angry?
Of course, it irritates me. Nevertheless, I consider or do believe that the majority of the ordinary people in the four corners of the globe do love me because they have different vision from that of the official governments.
But Gaddafi's outlandish antics should not mask his brutal reputation. Libya was implicated in the bombing of a Berlin disco, which killed and injured U.S. soldiers, and the 1988 bombing of Pan Am 103, which killed nearly 300 people.
So let's think about that for a second. Muammar Gaddafi, a man who was a terrorist, by all accounts in the word, who fashioned himself as some self-styled folk hero to no one but himself. One interview question with Barbara Walters had this man shook. It's like he went from feeling himself to like, am I really everything that they say I am? Yes, you're a terrorist. And this woman sat there and pointed out the truth to you. But again, Barbara Walters has been famous for a multitude of interviews. But outside the Kardashians, outside of interviewing terrorists, I still say this was probably the most effective use of, well, trying to prove a point that a couple shouldn't be together.
What people write about you, say about you. You know, this is the beautiful, glamorous actress with her beautiful, glamorous mother who are out to ruin this, basically, I don't know what. Tough guy?
Naive, yes.
Yeah. Why do they say it?
I think people wonder why we're together.
You are a college graduate, right? Well-educated, actress. This is a man who was a high school dropout, who went to reform school. You're very different, at least on the surface. Why do you love him?
Because he's smart, and because he's gentle. He's got this incredibly gentle side. Because Michael loves me more than anything in the world. I feel like he needs me, which I like. I like that.
Well, that's why I love her, because she really feels that she can protect me.
There was no prenuptial agreement.
No. And why should there be? There's a certain sense of idealism that comes with being young that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. We got married to be together forever, not to plan for divorce.
What do you think about what Robin's saying?
She's totally true. I mean, and about a prenuptial agreement, I wouldn't know how to go about to ask her to sign it. If you're going to marry somebody, you trust them, and that's what marriage is all about, is being together for the rest of your life. For this stage of my life, I do have many a millions. My wife would just have to ask for it, and she has every penny I have. If she wants it right now, she could leave right now. Take everything I have and just leave. She has the right to do that. She has the power to do that. She's still here. She tolerates and I love my wife.
You said all your millions. Robin could have anything she wanted. Does she ask for a lot? Does she spend a lot?
No, I have to force her to buy things. I have to force her to dress a certain way. Like, she wants to go out with jeans and boots.
Robin, some of the things that we've read, that he's hit you, that he's chased you and your mother around in Russia, that Mike has a very volatile temper. True?
Extremely volatile temper. I think people see that about every 3 months. He's got a side to him that's scary. Michael is intimidating, to say the least. I think that there's a time when he cannot control his temper, and that's frightening to me or to my mother, and to anyone around. It's scary.
What happens?
He gets out of control, throwing, screaming.
Does he hit you?
He shakes, he pushes, he swings. Sometimes I think he's trying to scare me. There were times when it happened when I thought I could handle it, And just recently I've become afraid. I mean, very, very much afraid. For instance,
so I had to cut off right there just because I remember as a kid watching that interview and I'm like, yep, Mike done now. Because, I mean, she just sat there and said on national television, yes, she may have not said the words. Body language says everything. But yeah, that's just a tidbit. And keep in mind, there are decades of interviews that Barbara Walters has done where, yeah, she was gangster journalism. She was not about to pull any punches. She was not about to let anybody off the hook. Even presidents, which again, we could be here all night going through all those, but we definitely want to give her flowers. And again, to her and Fred White, to definitely rest in peace for those two monumental figures. Now, let's move along to the disarray that is Congress, shall we? As you guys know, midterms are over. Republicans got the House, Democrats got the Senate. As of just 2 days ago, the 118th Congress was sworn in, and the Republicans who are ready to go ahead and stop progressive Joe Biden and keep all the Democrats from spending only had one job: elect a new leader to be the House Majority Speaker. And Kevin McCarthy thought he had it in the bag. In the words of SpongeBob, 2 days later.
It's not the kind of history Republicans were hoping to make. Tonight, for the first time in 100 years, failing to elect a Speaker of the House.
A Speaker has not been elected.
On ballot?
A Speaker has not been elected.
After ballot.
A Speaker has not been elected.
The chaos, the result of a bitter battle between Republicans, a small but stubborn faction of right-wing members voting against party leader Kevin McCarthy.
People ask me, what do you want? I want the tools or I want the leadership to stop the swamp from running over the average American every single day.
McCarthy projecting confidence this morning.
I'm not going anywhere. I will always fight to put the American people first, not a few individuals that want something for themselves.
But also predicting a drawn-out process.
McCarthy, is there any scenario in which you drop out of this race?
No.
McCarthy had already made major concessions to the rebel Republicans who were pushing him for prime committee seats, commitments to vote on specific legislation, and rules changes, including some that would make it easier to oust a speaker later. With the House constitutionally bound to elect a speaker before taking up any other business, rank-and-file Republicans, the vast majority of whom backed McCarthy, growing frustrated by the small group of holdouts.
If I didn't know any better, it's like the Democrats paid these people off. Let's pay them off. Let's make it look like the Republicans can't govern and don't deserve any gavels whatsoever. That's what it makes it look like.
For much of the day, top Democrat Hakeem Jeffries actually had more votes for Speaker than McCarthy. But Republicans hold the narrow House majority and the only real path to electing a Speaker, if they can agree on who.
So, Garrett, it appears they're heading now for a fourth round of voting tomorrow. But are the Republicans getting any closer to consensus?
No, Lester, they're actually farther away. McCarthy losing 20 Republican votes on the last ballot tonight. We can only afford to lose 4. Also tonight, former President Trump declining to stand by his endorsement of McCarthy, telling me in a brief interview, we'll see what happens.
Damar Hamlin's life and death emerged.
Got away from me. I want to say this so bad because, when and by the way, that was earlier in the day. It's been 6 attempts for the Republicans to nominate their House Speaker. As of today, the House concluded with no Speaker because McCarthy, you don't have the votes. You don't have the votes. Look, if you're on TikTok, you know Hamilton. They've been using that song quite a lot. No, he doesn't have the votes. Why? Because Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lorraine Boebert, and a handful of other Republicans have sat there and said, no, until you concede to our demands, we are not going to vote because you have to have at least you have to have at least 213 votes to be nominated House Speaker. McCarthy has been getting 200, 202, and embarrassingly 185, which goes to show you that a handful of Republicans are keeping, just like the NBC journalist has said, until a House Speaker is nominated, they can't do anything else, which means a whole lot of legislation, discussions, bills that are on the docket are going to be held up until the Republicans, which I never thought I'd say in this day and age, will have to literally and figuratively come together and nominate someone. And McCarthy still believes that it's him. And I find it amazing. And this is why I'm saying it so bad. I find it amazing that as many times I sat there and talked about the Democrats, specifically Manchin and Sinema, as many times I talked about them, look at the Republicans now. Because I used to say it all the time. Say what you want about Republicans, but when it comes down to the party line, everybody toes the line. Except when they have a body of Congress that the majority in, and now they want to change the rules, which is like, oh, we want prime seats on the committee. Sounds like you want to make sure you have a job. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, by the way, reelected, as of this time, has no congressional responsibilities, which means she's not on any board, not on any commission. She is literally almost ousted from Congress except to show up for participation on voting. She's basically getting paid for free. Being that she's a representative, she gets $174,000 a year for doing nothing. Better health care, protection via the Secret Service, and she's getting paid to literally argue for nothing. I'm in the wrong job. On top of that, Lorraine Bobbert, a woman who reminds me of Sarah Palin, if Sarah Palin was 20 years younger, is going to argue that we don't want Kevin McCarthy because Kevin McCarthy is going to let the Democrats run wild. Meanwhile, Mitch McConnell's in the Senate like, ain't nobody paying attention to me. But it's not surprising. And it's amazing how you see some Republicans say, well, it's almost like the Democrats paid the Republicans. First off, Republicans already bought and paid for. There's not really much of a bargain or a auction there. Not to say that some Democrats have been bought and paid for either, because they have. But it's amazing that for the most simplest process going into a new Congress being sworn in, that the problem is they can't seem to agree on who they want to follow. If that doesn't tell you about the state of conservatism in this country, nothing will. But I can't say it's all bad for Republicans, because you know why? Because there is a current DC mayor right now that is wanting Joe Biden to do what he did to railroad workers, force them back to work. And yes, I cannot make this up.
The federal government represents 1/4 of DC's pre-pandemic jobs and owns or leases 1/3 of our office space. We need decisive action by the White House to either get most federal workers back to the office most of the time, or to realign their vast property holdings for use by the local government, by nonprofits, by businesses, and by any user willing to revitalize it. America wins when the place where people come to join and change the world is buzzing. Buzzing with new graduates and interns, with the startup that has the big idea to meet with its federal partners, or business travelers who are coming to Washington to get work done. And of course, with the lobbyists.
So that is the new DC mayor that was just elected. And the first thing that she wants Joe Biden to do, the Biden administration, we want you to force government workers back to work. This is the problem I have with this, that because of the pandemic, and yes, we are still in a pandemic, companies have had to adjust. Because at the time we didn't understand COVID, we didn't really have a good handle on transmissions, we didn't really have a good handle on vaccines. You had everybody who wasn't a scientist, who did not study biology, who apparently never worked in a lab, or never did tons and tons of medical research, all had their opinions over those who were more than qualified to let us know that, hey, you might want to wear a mask, you might want to avoid people, you might want to avoid large crowds. Just saying. But now, because we're kind of getting to a point to where we're getting a handle on it, but there's still cases out there, still plenty of variants, but you're wanting government workers to come back in. Now, I've always been on the fence about this because, number one, me working remote from home for a little over 2 years now, I'm not going to lie, I can't see myself going back into the office. Can't. I like the fact of working from home. I like the fact of, not having to get up and go through traffic, not having to find parking spaces, not paying additional gas from going back and forth, more wear and tear on my car, dealing with folks that I don't really want to deal with. And the fact of the matter is that the most I'm going to have is a once in a blue Microsoft Teams call. That is a beautiful thing, honestly. Now, I understand there are some jobs that do require you to be on site. Now, here's the problem with Biden. Biden is already forcing the railroad workers. Try saying that 5 times fast. Union, because you guys remember at the end of the year, around Christmas time, they were planning to strike again. And the most vital places out there, you definitely don't want to go on strike. And there are rail yards, train yards, anywhere where a lot of inventory, a lot of product is being exported or imported to the United States. And when those people decide to strike, let's be honest, the entire market from end to end takes a hit. Now, why is that relevant? It's relevant because you're asking government workers to do the same. If a lot of government workers are working from home, and this particular DC mayor is saying, hey, we need you to force people to come back, what does that really say about the American economy? Because if you think about it, Yes, we still had the highest numbers of quitting last November. And yes, there are plenty of jobs out there that are still hiring, supposedly. I can go down a whole other route of, everybody says they don't want to work. There's all these jobs. Yes, but companies are getting picky now. Companies are not actually hiring as much as they could do, considering the fact they've been given all the assistance and money and time and money and time and PPP loans that are still being handed out. And yet hiring has not increased unless it's a junk job, $9 to $10 an hour, which, by the way, nobody can work off of anymore. Not even $15 an hour. It has to, unfortunately, because everything's gone up in your paycheck, and then our minimum wage is still $7.29 an hour. That it doesn't dawn on people, especially our presidential administration, where again, Joe, the problem is people don't want to kill themselves trying to make ends meet and still be broke. And these younger generations that are entering the workforce are just going to be like, bump it. I want to work here. I'll quit. And that's having a rapid effect, even though companies are trying to call it quiet quitting. But let's be honest, there's nothing quiet about quitting, because I still sit there and argue all the time. When a company's ready to let you go, they don't give you a 2-week notice. So why should you give them one? But again, that's rambling. I apologize. But Biden forcing workers to go back is not a good look, especially for a president that is gearing up for another presidential campaign run literally around the corner in 2024. How time flies. It doesn't look good for Biden's Democratic president to be pushing people to work when those same people he's going to be asking to vote for him next year. But Biden also did something else, which again is concerning. Well, not really, because I always say the government always kicks the can down the road when it comes to the spending bill. But a bill was forged and actually made to President Biden's desk. But please pay attention to the last bit of what that bill is going to contain.
President Biden has signed a $1.7 trillion spending bill into law. It averts a government shutdown and funds federal agencies through September. The bill was flown to St. Croix, where Biden is vacationing with his family. It includes a 10% boost in military spending and $45 billion for Ukraine.
So I got to stop right there. 10% spending for military and $45 billion package to Ukraine. Now, you're probably wondering, for a lot of numbers out there, how much money is being sent to Ukraine? Well, right now, the number is almost closer to $200 billion. Keep in mind, we first started helping Ukraine when Putin and Russia was like, looking at Ukraine like, yeah, you belong to us. We're going to invade. And yes, NATO eventually did get involved, but at the same time, we're still funding the Ukraine. We're still funding Ukraine. It's not a good look for Americans who are already having a hard time making bills, making ends meet on bills on stuff that I just got through talking about. And now you find out that very same government just sent $45 billion in aid and assistance to Ukraine. The same $45 billion in assistance that could have been sent to its own Americans. I say this all the time. Democrats will have to answer for that. Democrats have done a lot of things. Don't get me wrong, a lot of pluses got done with the Democrats with a slim majority. But I always ask this question, whenever it comes to foreign aid, why is it always so easy to give up? But when you help the American people, it is literally like getting a tag at the DMV and it's a full house, which means that eventually you may get answered, you may get fed up and leave. Either way, they still win. And I have to ask that question, that why is it that unless we're a foreign country, we will not get aid from the U.S.? You won't. Not as quick as you think you will. But the other thing that annoys me, though, is the other part, where it sits there and says, oh, well, we also are going to give a 10% increase in military spending. Do you understand that the increase in military spending right now is literally getting closer by the day to over $2 trillion? Keep in mind, when it comes to the military, the Pentagon specifically has failed every audit they've ever been given. Yes, the U.S. Pentagon, with the military budget, has never been able to account for a penny of the funding it's been receiving, and they just been increased by another 10%. I can't help but wonder why this question isn't being asked. That why is the Pentagon given a blank check and their budget increases every year, but as Americans, we still don't feel any safer? I have to ask that question. Well, I'm not being come up missing, but again, Just pointing that out. It's hard to be happy that, Congress has fully fueled themselves for another congressional budgetal year, but at the same time, we could have done without the 10 increase. I mean, if anything, we kind of need to decrease our spending in defense and maybe not be so gung-ho to give foreign aid because a country is getting involved by another country, when the other country should be looking at other countries to look at them and not at us as if we're the world police. Just saying. But to go back to the Republicans a little bit, outside of Herschel Walker, I've never seen anybody lie their way into a congressional seat, except George Santos, who right now might be in a little bit more hot water than just fudging his resume.
Aaron Katersky's been on this story, joins us now. Aaron, so it's hard to keep up with this story. Day after day, we're learning more that isn't true about George Santos. What are you learning today?
A couple of things, Terry. One, he had claimed at one point to have attended the elite Horace Mann School here in New York, up in the Bronx. And we talked to the school. The school said it has no record of him ever attending. And then the other thing we're learning too, Terry, is that Santos is going under the microscope by yet a third prosecutor's office. You have federal prosecutors out of Brooklyn who are taking a look at his financial disclosures, the district attorney in Nassau County on Long Island, who's looking into what she called fabrications and inconsistencies that are nothing short of stunning. And now you have the Queens District Attorney's Office, so the other area that his district encompasses, taking a look to see whether any crimes were committed. There's no guarantee that there are, but you now have a lot of eyes on Santos, his biography, and his financial disclosures.
Well, let me follow up on that. As you point out, it is not a crime for politicians to lie to voters. God knoweth that. I mean, they've been doing it most of American history. But this is pretty striking. There is nothing to prevent Santos from being seated in Congress next week because there's nothing illegal about lying to voters. What kinds of things, might prosecutors be looking at?
Well, I think they're primarily interested in the sources of his wealth and how he seemed to go from rags to riches nearly overnight, and whether any of the money that he loaned his campaign, more than $700,000, whether that was done properly. It's not clear that there necessarily is a crime to actually investigate. They're only taking a look at publicly available findings at this stage, but I think that all of these eyeballs are now on him shows that he hasn't been able to really clear this up. He's done a series of interviews on television and in print that only seem to cloud his biography and an upbringing, from what he's done to who he is.
And on this question of how he got to be a congressman-elect, I got to say the opposition researcher of his opponent probably should never be hired to do that job again. I mean, this is like shooting fish in a barrel, it seems now that people are actually looking at his resume. But he got this far, beating an incumbent Democrat in New York City. Why didn't the Democrat, it seems like political malpractice not to find some of this stuff?
Yeah, really, it's on the opposition research. Maybe it's on us too, Terry, and the press for not digging in. To be fair, some of this did come up during the campaign, but nothing really seemed to stick until after the fact, when the New York Times laid it all out in a single, rather stunning article about all the discrepancies, what Santos calls resume padding, and that other people call outright lies. And Terry, I don't know what it says about us. Does it say that we don't care because certain voters have been trained as long as you have the R or the D next to your name? That's what matters. And in this case, let's stick it to Pelosi and the Democrats, and who cares what he says? Or have we come as a country to expect so little integrity from our elected officials? Whatever the reason, Santos is prepared to take his seat in Congress on Tuesday. He says he will not resign. And the only way that he would leave office is if voters kick him out in the next election.
Right. And he's got some time to try to repair the damage that he's done to himself by lying to the voters so extensively. Aside from his lies about his professional financial background, Santos once has called himself a proud American Jew, and then he said he never claimed to be Jewish and that he's a proud Catholic. So what's been the reaction to those, offensive claims? Especially at one point he said, well, he's not Jewish, he's Jewish.
Jewish is how how he puts it, and he says he's a practicing Catholic. That's how he was raised. He does have, he says, ties to people who fled the Holocaust and who were in Ukraine. But he says he doesn't carry any kind of a Ukrainian name. We heard from a rabbi today, Terry, in his district, who said for her it's just offensive to kind of claim ties to the Holocaust for political gain, and she said that's just not what anybody should be doing. There are a number of Jewish groups who are quite upset about how Santos presented himself on the campaign trail. But as you point out, Terry, being untruthful or misrepresenting who you are is not necessarily a crime and may not be cause for being taken from office.
Yeah, well, if he is a practicing Catholic, sounds like he's got to practice a little harder. On some.
So, yeah, George Santos is currently being under investigating, not because of the fact that he lied on his resume, not because of the fact that you just dismayed a lot of people to get elected, but the fact that he might have misappropriately used funds. But it is amazing. They did bring up a wonderful point that even though he lied, even though he called himself a Jewish person and he's not, says he's Catholic. Well, we're going to wait on the Vatican for that one. But he's not stepping down. And Republicans, of course, will not force him to step down because Republicans need every seat in the House they can get right now. Republicans have their own issues trying to elect the leader. Do you think they're going to out somebody just because they were dishonest? Finding honesty in politics is like finding a Kardashian that's a virgin. That's just being honest. It's unheard of. Rare? Yes. Unheard of? Maybe. I'm sorry. Rare, unheard of, more than likely. Rare? You betcha. Because, again, he's there, and I hate to say this, and I'm trying to be so nice. It is very easy on the conservative side because conservatism is split into radical versus modern. And as long as you're against Democrats in red states, they'll vote for you. This podcast tomorrow, and I say this all the time, I don't ever consider myself conservative or Democrat. I consider myself progressive, which means there are some things that Democrats may not agree with me on, but there's a lot of things that Republicans will definitely not agree with me on. But that being said, however, if I were to turn around and start sounding like a Fox drone tomorrow, I would be on Hannity, Ingram, and possibly douchebag Tucker Carlson show overnight. Candace Owens will sit right next to me and say I'm the best thing since sliced bread as she tries to hustle me to buy something else her husband woefully created that nobody wants. But that's the thing about conservatives. That's the thing about conservatives, Republicans, and GOP. If you say God's guns and country, you're in. You're in, and money and fame and everything else follows. Especially if you're a black person, because let's be honest, Tim Scott is the only black senator on the Republican Party. Do you even want to imagine how many black representatives are in the Republican Party right now? Give you a wild guess. You can count on one hand, maybe a fingernail. But again, if the whole idea, the mentality of it is only those who believe he is distrustful, which one would think, why not actually have it to where to run for office, we do need to have a set of standards. We do. If you are running for political office, there needs to be a set of standards. There needs to be checks and balances. That if you are found fault in anything that you said that you did, and we found out that you didn't, instant disqualification. That's how it should be. I get no issue with that. I even said a couple podcasts ago that for the Senate and the House, they should really have the same consecutive terms as the president. You can serve 2 consecutive terms if elected. After that, you got to sit one out. Imagine the level of work that we get done, because right now, for most politicians, whether you're a senator or representative, that's almost a lifelong career. And why not? As long as the people elect you, you have a guaranteed salary, guaranteed health care, and protection. And you basically get to run the country. It's a dream freaking job that requires, and this is the scary part about all this. The scary part. There is no qualifications outside of being a U.S. citizen and being over 18 years of age that you can run for Senate or you can run for the House. You know what the president's qualifications are? You have to be at least 35 years old and be a U.S. citizen. That's about it. So anybody can run. And that's the scary part. Instead of actually putting requirements in that actually force people to either A, meet those qualifications, or B, dismay those that shouldn't be there in the first place, we just leave it an open door with a simple policy. And nobody doesn't think that that's maybe wrong with the government as it stands now, that instead of us actually having a filter, we actually have a revolving door. Just saying. But move right along, guys. I know you guys, we talked about Southwest and, of course, the massive issue they had because they had an outdated system that just couldn't take anymore. You were basically short-staffed on pilots and flight crews and had to cancel well over 1,000 flights. Well, they've gotten better, sort of.
Travel mess. The airline says it will return to normal service today after a week-long meltdown that left passengers stranded, flight crews unaccounted for, and baggage scattered all across the country. We'll talk to Southwest CEO Bob Jordan in just a moment, but first, let's go to Elwyn Lopez at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport for the very latest. Elwyn, good morning.
Hey, Wick, good morning. After 8 days of scrapped flights, Southwest finally getting back on track, but now that airline under fire for that holiday travel nightmare.
This morning, after nearly 16,000 canceled flights, Southwest Airlines finally catching up.
All the flexibility and planning that we put in place to deal with the storm just wasn't enough. And so we've extended flexibility for self-service travel changes through January 2nd.
Fewer than 50 flights canceled today so far. This after 96% of airline cancellations on Thursday came from Southwest, scrapping holiday plans for thousands. The Sethmans forced to return home after their flight was delayed multiple times, then canceled, leaving the airport without their baggage and without cars for their 2 children.
We had to hold our kids in the car and in the back seat because Southwest said there was no loaner car seats. They had been out since the day before.
Southwest now facing another daunting challenge, returning a sea of luggage strewn across airports nationwide. The company's stock plunging as other airlines stabilize their own. As for those nearly 16,000 flights canceled since last Wednesday, the Department of Transportation now investigating.
We will penalize Southwest as we would any airline to the tune potentially of tens of thousands of dollars per violation if they fail to meet what is required of them to take care of passengers.
And Southwest says it will work on a case-by-case basis with passengers to reimburse them for the expenses incurred during those disruptions. The Department of Transportation says that it will keep a close eye on the airline to make sure that it meets its legal obligations.
Elwyn, thank you. Joining us now exclusively is Bob Jordan, the CEO of Southwest Airlines, in his first TV interview since the widespread cancellations began over the holiday. Bob, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. So your airline has said normal operations will resume today. How confident are you that will hold through the holiday weekend? And can you promise a meltdown of this magnitude won't happen again?
Well, good morning. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, we're off to a great start today. I'm watching the stats, and we've launched the East Coast, and we have a great operation underway. It's our full schedule, 3,900 plus flights. We had a reduced schedule for about 3 days here prior as we reset the network. That reduced schedule the last 2 days has been running great, over 90% on time, very few cancels. So I'm very confident that we'll operate a really tight operation today.
As you know, we're days into this, thousands of flights canceled, people stranded over the holidays, your own pilots and crew members unable to reach the people responsible for scheduling them. How did things go so horribly wrong?
Well, it's a number of things. This was just an unprecedented storm for everybody, for all airlines. It was widespread across the country, record cold. For us, what's different is we are the top airline in 23 of the top 50 cities. So it just hit so many large locations at the same time. And we had record temperatures that did things like froze jetways, froze aircraft, froze de-icing fluid. And when you're trying to solve a problem in so many locations, it becomes very, very difficult. Airlines count on the aircraft and the passengers and the crew members continuing to move. And when all that shuts down in so many locations, it becomes very, very tough. And at some point, solving that problem. And we have great tools and processes, but solving that problem becomes very daunting.
But Bob, forgive me. You talked about. Forgive me here. You did talk about the weather, and people understand that. And there were widespread cancellations due to the weather across the country with other airlines. But Southwest's situation was very different. Thousands of cancellations continued for days and days. Some have blamed the technology. What is your response to the system you operate, and whether that needs to be updated too?
Yeah, I'm not. Let me just be straightforward here. The storm had an impact, but we had impacts beyond the storm that obviously impacted Southwest very differently. It really was the scope of the problems attempting to be solved, just to move crews around, keep the airline moving. We have great tools. We have regular operations. Those tools and processes serve us well, but this is something that we have really never seen in our 51 years. And we're making investments in our operational areas like always. There'll be lessons learned from this, and we'll continue to make more investments.
Transportation.
Yeah, so let's stop it right there, because that's the part that I wanted to get at. Aside from the fact that, number one, the fact that the Department of Transportation, Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, was pretty much saying, well, we're looking into what could happen with Southwest. It could be fines. Southwest is a $1 billion airline company. Fines is like the buzzing of flies. They're just going to get out a fly swatter, and that's going to be the end of it. And I hate that, because, again, airline industries have done one of two things. The airline industry has done two things successfully, mind you. Number one, they have literally stopped the expansion of a possible light, high-speed rail bullet train system in the U.S., a similar way that China, Europe, and other countries have. Airline industries have successfully lobbied against that for decades. Number two, they have made themselves the number one way of transportation across the U.S. And I say number one because, again, now people like driving in a car. If you're trying to get to Florida in less than, if me living in Tennessee, I can get to Florida inside of an hour versus 6 hours on the road. Or I can get to New York in a matter of 3 hours versus 11 hours on the road. Yes, airline travel is safe, and they've made it that way. But the problem with Southwest is they're outdated. Again, I'm a tech person, okay? I do believe that, some systems do work for a certain extent. The problem, however, is that the extent has been reached. You hear a lot of people in social media, especially former Southwest airline pilots and flight crewmen, have came forward and said, yes, the system is woefully outdated. And it seems like it's been a major complaint with Southwest for a long time, and that no major adjustments are being done. Even when the journalists themselves said, well, could this be the fact that your system's outdated? What do CEOs do in that situation? They pivot and pivot hard. Well, I don't think your systems are the problem. I just think that it was just a weather system that we were just totally unprepared for. You have radar systems, weather systems, satellites, and everything else. It's not like you couldn't see the storm coming. And at the same time, what they didn't say is that Southwest Airlines works off an outdated hub system, which, again, doesn't help you well if you're already shorthanded, and that you have to call in pilots to come in and fly, and flight crews to come in and take care of the plane just to keep flights going. This is what happens when you don't take pay seriously. Because say what you will, I have never seen a company that didn't pay well have a shortage of workers. When companies are paying well, they never have a shortage of workers. If anything, they're turning people away. But like I said before, with this pandemic, why are we really surprised? Because people, like I said a long time ago, same thing with fast food. Like apparently, wherever you're at, whether it's McDonald's, a McDonald's or Burger King, take your pick of your fast food joints. More than likely, it's backed up. Why? Because nobody want to work for $15 an hour. These are the same people that turn around telling folks, hey, you want a better job? Go find one. They did. Hence why your favorite fast food joint is just a little bit longer to get food now. Airline industry is the same way, which again, will Southwest possibly be fined? Yes, but it'll be pennies. No lesson will be learned from that. You cannot, and I say this all the time, You cannot fine $1 billion company to think that lessons are going to be learned. Don't believe me? Look at banks. Wells Fargo has committed multiple atrocities in identity fraud. And last time I checked, they're still open. They may switch CEOs, but business runs as usual. That's why I'm sitting there saying fines don't simply work when we need to be bringing some people up on criminal charges, because jail is a lot more effective than a fine. But I digress. Will Southwest update themselves eventually? But the fact that the CEO didn't sit there and take accountability and say, yes, this is our fault. We should have done better. We will do better. The fact that he didn't do it screams volumes. Or his PR person told him not to. One of the two. But the last one we got, guys, before we get to our feel good segment, again, with taxes, again, like I said, it's a new year. Everybody, for a lot of people, are waiting for the 31st for them W-2s, so you can go on TurboTax or whatever, or if you want to fill out your own taxes, or you want to e-file, we're all waiting for those tax refund checks. Well, here's some news that will not affect you in 2023, but will affect you in 2024. And should be concerned or should be happy. I'm not really sure.
Let's talk about inflation, Tom, while I have you. Some good news has to do with taxes. What can you tell us?
So because inflation is running so hot right now, we are now seeing that the IRS is going to increase the standard deduction on your taxes. Now, we're talking tax year 2023 that starts in January, but this could have an impact on you. For married couples, your standard deduction is expected to increase $1,800 to almost $28,000. Singles, about a $900 increase in your standard deduction to almost $14,000. Now, we're talking about tax year 23. These are the taxes you pay in 2024. But the good news is this may actually bump you or bring you down into a lower tax bracket. So you may see some extra dollars in your paycheck withholdings. You may see extra dollars in your paycheck, I should say, if the employer starts adjusting you based on inflation and based on what's going to be happening to your tax bracket. 23 tax year, not this year, tax year 23. Guys, back to you.
Got it.
So what does that basically mean for all those that you should be concerned? That could mean that, yes, you could possibly get a little bit more money coming your way. You could. Keep in mind, they did talk about what possibly to expect, especially if you're single. Like I said, I know I ain't single, but let me go back to the video for a second. Okay, so look at this. So these are the tax adjustments that are going to happen for 2023. As you can see, married couples, $1,800 will increase to $2,770. Singles will increase for $900 increase to $13,850. What does that mean? Because I know a lot of people you were asking that. That basically means that yes, taxes will increase, which means that it is possible that you might see a little bit more in your paycheck and you might see a little bit more in your tax refund. As of right now, I don't have any scenarios, but trust and believe in the next coming weeks, we will definitely investigate that. But again, it's not bad. I still say that, again, to grow the economy, you have to stop kicking the lowest person on the totem pole. You have to stop. Unfortunately, in Trump's case, he decided to take away our tax breaks and give it to the top because some conservatives still believe that Reaganomics work, and they don't. They never have. It's been proven. But for some odd reason, those out there still believe that if we give the rich people all the money and all the benefits, they create jobs. Elon Musk should have been a great counterexample to that BS. So, that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and move on to our feel-good segment. As usually on the Frack guy here, we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes we can lose our faith in humanity, but hey, it is the hump day. It is Wednesday. Tomorrow is Thursday as we get through our first week of the year in 2023. And we will leave you guys out some good vibrations. And hopefully this next story about a 9-year-old poet will do just that, as he was called in for the inauguration of a certain politician.
9-year-old standing on his tiptoes.
I didn't think people could see me.
delivering what many are calling the most powerful speech of New York Governor Kathy Hochul's inauguration.
In my mind, I used to be a child of poverty, not knowing that hopes and dreams can become reality.
The speech only 82 seconds long, but the crowd in Albany hung on Caden Hearn's every word.
Black is the color of my skin, so soft, beautiful, silky, and smooth.
The fourth grader received a personal invitation from Governor Hochul to serve as poet laureate on Sunday.
My strategy is I don't look at the crowd. I look straight up and think of like the good things that have happening to you.
Caden first got into poetry during the pandemic, thanks to some encouragement from his grandmother, who was with him in Albany this week.
I was so overjoyed. I was full of emotion. I was the proudest grandmother in the whole wide world.
Caden first met Governor Hochul at the Apollo in Harlem last summer when he performed at Amateur Night.
Wanting to make my ancestors proud. Who am I?
Caden introduced himself to the governor, said he was a poet, and shared one of his pieces with her.
Who am I? A child, a black male child, wanting to live but not afraid to die.
Governor Hochul promised that if she got elected, he'd be invited to her swearing-in ceremony. As for what's next for Caden,
maybe speaking for the president.
I have a feeling that will happen in no time. It'll also
All I can say is rumble, young man, rumble. Because I thought that was pretty cool, especially the fact that level of confidence that young man had. That was a beautiful thing. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. I do thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. We are still working on the video issues. For some odd reason, I'm still trying to figure out why I'm a little bit delayed. But thank you for still rocking with me all the same. Before I do get out of here, some shameless plugging as I usually do. Shout out to my buddy Vaughn at BigVZA. On all socials. You can definitely see him on Facebook, on YouTube, as he does his TikToks, and he's back to making beats and some out there type of post, but you know, that's fun. But definitely check him out, BigVZA on all socials. As for myself, guys, you can find me on all socials at BlackFox447. Like and follow me. I usually post everything that I watch, play, review, sometimes gym stuff because I do a couple push-ups. The link at the bottom, guys, let me make that just a wee bit bigger to where you can find us. That's actually the link that actually has the podcast groups, whether Facebook or YouTube, for all of my shows. How the Frack We Got Here, Get Bit, and of course the Off Limits Podcast. Like, share, subscribe, spread the word, because again, I'm just trying to make this news podcast because again, I keep saying this all the time. It is essential to know what's going on, not only in your local area, not only with your country, not only with your government, because again, if you are informed, you will act. The only ones that don't act are simply not wanting to or just happy with the status quo. But my mission in life for this podcast is to always inform others, so that way educating you hopefully leads to you guys getting more involved, because again, it's not just the federal. It has to affect the local and state governments, and you can move up from there. But that's the goal I want. Also, guys, I understand traveling is still a thing. A lot of people are still returning in from the holidays. Please be safe, guys. If you're going through heavy traffic areas, please wear a mask. If you're sick, stay at home, because we're still in the middle of a pandemic. Variants are still out there. If you protect yourself, you protect others, and that's how we get through this. Of course, with that being said, guys, last thing I'll say about how the Frack We Got Here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information to allow you to make an informed decision, but we do provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot better as a society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, just last year electing our first black 4-star military general in the armed forces. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up by our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians but still the same old still the same old game in Congress? But most importantly, how the Frack We Got Here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other. We will all get through this. Peace.